everybody. I love that you all were even just talking about the zone of genius, because I think that will likely make a reappearance in this conversation, although that's not the phrase that I use, but it certainly is very relevant. So today is going to be a slightly different, I can share a deck if you want me to, but I think we can do this probably as more of a conversation as well. Because today is the third of our 3 workshop series, and we are going to be, so we've been, of course, talking about authenticity, and today we are going to be talking about how to unleash more of your full potential, how to step into yourself more fully, to know yourself and be yourself, because I think that that's really where we have the greatest impact and certainly the most joy and fulfillment. Hi, everybody that's just joining us. We're just getting started. Excuse me. So just to review what we have covered up to this point, I think everybody here was on both of the previous workshops, but just to kind of like lay the quick foundation of what we covered, the most important part of what we covered in session 1 was, what is authenticity? And, you know, what do we think it means versus what does it actually mean, and what keeps us from being authentic? And of course, we talked a lot about identity in that conversation as well. But when we boil it down, authenticity is really about acting with intention instead of reacting from a place of fear or self-protection or ego. And so much of that, and the reason that's so important, is because most of what we're reacting to or from is coming from our unconscious, and it's happening before we ever even notice it. So until we start really placing a lot more awareness into our patterns, it stays in sort of that invisible unconscious place. And so we talked a lot last time about what I call the magic wand. So how do we get to a place of being more intentional? And the way that we do that is through what I call the magic wand. So first, we have to really build our repertoire, understand, like, what are the things that we're doing, that we're pulling on ourselves all the time that we don't even notice, like those identity triggers or the unconscious reactive patterns. And then when we're in the moment, it's about reflecting. What are the stories I'm telling myself? What are the experiences, the physical experiences I'm having? And then the second step of that is to accept what is the feeling that's coming up, and how can I just let it be there without reacting to it, so that we can pause and breathe and recover. And then finally, it's to redirect, choose intentionally, how do we want to show up in the moment, so it's not coming from a place of fear or discomfort or protection of ourselves. So again, it's reflect, accept, redirect. And of course, we had a really great conversation about empathy and compassion and how we can show up with more intention versus just continuing to act from a place of self-protection. So that's what we're going to talk a lot more about today. Is now that you kind of know the practical steps, how do you like really put this into practice? And you know, many of us are very good. It's the new year. Many of us are very good at setting big goals for ourselves, ways that we want to show up differently, or be more intentional, or step into our zone of genius, or speak up, or be more compassionate, or whatever it might be. But often we set really big goals and then we can't actually maintain them. And so then, you know, at the beginning of the next year, or the next perf cycle, or the next QBR, or the next whatever it is, you're sort of back to where you were. You may have made a couple of very small incremental changes, but you keep sliding back. And this goes back to that 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brake idea. So we're going to spend some time talking about what are like some of the most really important foundational elements to ensure you have in place to help set you up for success, for really meaningful and transformational change. Are there any questions that anybody has as you've reflected on the discussions and the observations and the awareness that we have had from the last couple of weeks? What's come up? Has anybody noticed any patterns?
Looking at my notes over and over.
Yeah. Anybody else notice any sort of like, oh gosh, I didn't even notice that I was doing that thing reactively. Didn't even really notice that I had this trigger I did from an identity perspective that keeps showing up in my life.
Probably happens so often we don't tend to notice it.
Right, which is the point of bringing more awareness to it.
Yeah, I mean, what I noticed, and it is the kind of convergence of, you know, the book we just finished at V5O, which is the big leap, where the zone of excellence, zone of genius comes from. And in you going so, wonderfully into our reactive unconscious. I mean, one of the concepts in the Big Leap is your upper limit problem. I got very much in touch with whenever I would get to a certain level of success, a certain level of happiness, all of a sudden, and I'm a very optimistic person, I was figuring out how to sabotage myself. And I thought it was one particular kind of situation or person. And it was great. I'm the youngest of three, and I'm speaking to my sister, who's 16 years my senior, and she opened my eyes to a family pattern going back to my dad's father and the relationship in business with his brother, which I can almost now accurately trace it back to that. And it's just made me much more aware. And, the reflecting, the pausing has been wonderful in the last, week or two of me doing it.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. And I love what you're saying about being able to trace it back. I mean, I was shocked. Like I've been trying to find myself basically my entire life. And I've been in therapy, like since I was, single digits, over, various times in my life. And no one ever really talked to me about just how important our familiar patterns and our early childhood patterns are for how we show up today. And those old scripts that we have running, the rules that we have in our head, the patterns that become unconscious that just, like we get to an upper limit and we don't even realize we're sabotaging ourselves. But now all of a sudden we go back to what feels familiar, even if it's not comfortable. And because it's what's known, and our unconscious goes, oh, I know exactly what to do here. Whereas when we get into that above the upper limit, that's all unknown, and that feels terrifying and very, very risky. So I haven't read The Big Leap, so I may be not saying what the author is saying, but that's the way I understand it. Yeah, Robert.
I think we kind of addressed it like towards the end of the last session, and for me, it's that timing mechanism, or that and I thought of something to do something better, but I mean, I know where it comes from. I've had enough therapy and to know what the trigger is. And it's more just, for me, it's, the hurt little boy that comes out, and it's a defense mechanism to kind of protect myself, but it's not a good trait, and that I was looking for the notes, but when dropping the bomb on somebody, it's like, to me, it's being too authentic. Like, somebody, telling somebody off, or telling somebody that they got something wrong to prove that I'm right. It's a no-win situation. So for me, I always go back to it, is just being the best person I can be. And you can't control other people. You can't, but it's that reaction mode, and so in a New York conversation, you don't have the opportunity to say, wait, hold on a second, let me relax. Let me calm down before I tell you off, and let me get myself together, and now we can. But I thought of something like, like if somebody's really nasty to you or really like abusive to you, excuse me, can you repeat yourself? I don't think I got that right. You just told me to go what? Just to give you a moment to like not react and like no, like
I love that.
Two people yelling and screaming over a parking spot. I'm sorry, you just called my mother a what? I don't know if I got that right, but let me take a moment to adjust.
And in a situation like that, it's very unlikely that there's ever going to, I mean, not that there's winners and losers, but in this case, like, we're probably not going to get to a place of kumbaya in that moment.
I was thinking of the best New York example I could make.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. And I think that it's really important for us to continue to talk about exactly that. Like, we don't have 90 seconds to go, let me just go cool off. But at the same time, we often think we don't, but we really often do have more space than we think we do. So we'll talk about that a little bit more today. And I think that's such a great point. And the more that, again, that we become familiar with what our triggers are, what our patterns are, the easier it is in the moment to go, oh, it's happening again. And then to be able to circumvent the reaction before it goes too far, even if we start it to a little bit. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so before we jump into the last part of the content, and like I said, we're going to be talking about really what those cornerstones are and diving in a little bit more into what can help you in the moment, both in preparation as well as in the moment. I thought I would spend a couple of minutes because there have been a few questions of how can people work with me, or how do I work with teams and organizations and individuals? And so I thought I would just spend a couple of minutes on that, and just to let you know what that's like, and then we'll continue back into the content. So just again, very quickly, I like to call myself a leadership advisor, a strategic business and leadership advisor. So really what I'm doing is I'm working with individuals, leaders, teams, organizations to help them unlock greater performance, profit, and potential with their teams. And my core belief is that we are most impactful when we are most authentic. And I believe that to my absolute core. And I also believe that our organizations, our clients, our companies, our teams, and certainly our world can benefit so greatly from us being more of ourselves. Because the more that we expand into that fullness of ourselves, the more that we tap into strengths and gifts that we have that nobody else has. But so much of the time we're holding ourselves back and limiting ourselves out of fear and comparison to others that is limiting what our potential is in our organizations and in our world, certainly. So again, the way I sort of like work with groups in 3 different ways. The first is strategic business and leadership advising. So my sort of like passions are strategic business or strategic problem solving and leadership development. So as many of you know, I worked at Google for 12 years. And in my last role when I was at Google, I oversaw the global strategic partnership with the McDonald's, which is one of Google's largest global partners. And so when I came into the organization, it was like a failing partnership, and nobody really wanted to work with them. And because of the work that we did together, we were able to grow that business 300% in 2.5 years, which is a very significant business for Google. And the way that we did that was by really, truly partnering and collaborating, developing cross-functional solutions. And that's what I love to do, is to work with teams and organizations to identify what is the true challenge that is really holding us back from really exponential change, exponential improvement, exponential transformation. Because many of us, and I see this with the coaching clients and certainly with organizations, we're solving the wrong problems. And we can't get to where we want to go until we identify what's holding us back from getting there. And much of the time we sort of launch into problem solving and we do things in a very status quo way. And if we really want to get to a much higher place, a new upper limit, we have to be willing to get innovative and creative and take risks. And that often comes back to not technical skills that we need to learn, but rather adaptive challenges that we have to change who we are in order to show up differently with the challenges that we're facing as an organization. So that's what I do with businesses, both from a advising standpoint, as well as with keynotes and workshops, similar to what we're doing here, and then executive coaching as well. So some of the companies I work with include, of course, Google and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm working with them on some of their leadership challenges and scale and like sales enablement things. But I also love to work with entrepreneurs and talk about go-to-market challenges and differentiation. And so, if there's any of this that sounds of interest, I absolutely love to brainstorm. And so if you would like to chat, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Alan and Lane will send out a scheduler link. Feel free to drop some time on my calendar or grab some time, because I really do love to chat and see if there are ways for us to partner, or ways that I can support your team or your organization. Any questions on that? Otherwise, we can move back into the content. Cool. Okay, so just to get back into what we're actually talking about today, I can show you slides if you want, or I can just talk through these. What do you prefer? Do you need to see slides? They're not really content heavy.
Please
Any
lead.
preference?
Lead.
Sorry?
Erika.
Lead?
Lead,
Okay.
Erika. Don't ask us to lead you.
Well, I am going to lead no matter what. It's just a matter of how much you want to see words on the slide versus here, like, look at me. So, okay, then I'm going to not use slides. If for some reason you decide you really needed to see the words, tell me, we can pull them up. So what I have found is that, again, like I said, many of us launch into wanting to make changes, and then we go hard for a while. If you've read something like Atomic Habits or some of these books on how to maintain changes, you're probably familiar
Can I
with some of
interrupt?
this. Yeah.
Erica, I do suggest the slides, actually. I do like to read.
Okay.
I
Well,
do suggest, yeah, thank you.
that's perfect. Thank you for jumping in with that. So one of my things is that I don't do real word heavy slides, but hopefully there will be some content on here that will be relevant for you. So what I was saying is that many of us, again, we think we can make a decision to make a change without considering the difficulty that it will be to actually maintain the implementation of it. So like, for instance, oh yeah, like I'm gonna work out every day. Like if it's weight loss, I'm gonna work out every day for an hour, and that's gonna be easy. For the first couple of weeks, you do it every day, and then you start, missing a couple of days, and then it like backslides, and then 2 months later you realize, oh, I haven't worked out in a month. So and this is just one example, of course, that many of us deal with, but there are so many examples of where the changes that we want to make, we have a hard time actually maintaining. And what I have really realized, especially when it comes to really changes that we care about that are important to us, is that there are a few cornerstones that when we have these in place, it makes keeping changes alive so much easier for us. So just to get us started, the first is feeling. And this goes to the conversation we were having, and Robert, what you were saying. Many of us, so if what we talked about, if the reflect, accept, redirect, the first step is reflect, what is the physical experience I'm having? And we don't actually know how we feel about anything. It's almost impossible to recognize that we have gotten triggered, right? So like, we don't recognize that our nervous system has activated a fear, fight or flight response until too late, because like the train has already left the station, so to speak. So the very first thing is to truly check in with how you're feeling. It is the key to authenticity, because it is our first sign of self-protection. And again, it's easy for us when we're really activated, like we can feel our heart beating, or we can feel our palms starting to sweat. Or for me, as I've said before, I can start to feel that my face turns bright red, but like we miss those subtle cues beforehand, because so many of us spend so much time in our heads that we don't really know what our bodies feel like. So what I would highly suggest is the first cornerstone is to spend time focusing on your energy, paying attention to your subtle cues of how you feel at different points. And I don't mean emotions, like that's part of it, but I actually literally mean feeling. So just to do a super quick activity, let's just spend a second. If you have anything in your hands, if you will bear with me for a quick second, take things out of your hands, and without moving your hands, without looking at your hands, without touching your hands, close your eyes for a quick second. See if you can feel your fingertips. How do you know they're there without touching them or looking at them?
It's a natural thing to do. You've been doing it your whole life.
Yes. Well, you know that your fingertips are there because, like, did they just fall off 2 seconds ago? Obviously not. But like, can you feel them? Can you feel the fingers?
Yes.
Without,
yes.
yeah. What does it feel like?
Well, I know that they're there. I'm aware of them. But you said no, don't move them, right?
Right. Don't move them. Don't look at them. Don't touch them.
So I know that I exist.
Yeah. This isn't an existential question. It's really, it's just a very like it's so, okay. But how do you know they're there? If you had your eyes closed, how would you know your fingers are there?
I know I feel pulsing in them.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Does anybody else feel that? Like a pulsing,
there's like an
or
energy or like, yeah, tingling.
Yeah. So that is always there. But again, unless we're really actually focused on it, we don't even notice it. But it's actually the life that is flowing through us, the energy that is flowing through us. And one of the things that is one of my first recommendations for people to start to get out of your head and start to really pay attention to what your body is doing. This also helps you cool down very, very, very quickly, is to actually pay attention to the energy flowing in your body. So for me, fingertips are the first place I go. I was just doing a group coaching exercise a couple of hours ago, and I was telling a story about the way that I used to practice being super present in meetings so that I wouldn't get reactive or defensive or whatever, is to place focus on my calves. So see right now, while we're talking, see if while you're listening to me, if you can also feel the energy flowing in your calves. Can you feel it? That's kind of like, start with your fingertips or your toes. But if you can't feel it, that says something. There's an opportunity to live more in your body. Most of us are living in our heads. And that's where our fear is. That's where our ego is. Our ego isn't in our body. Our life is in our body. So what I highly recommend is whenever you notice yourself starting to get pulled out, starting to get triggered, focus on your actual body, the energy. You can even do it like as in your regular meetings, just as practice, especially if you notice yourself getting distracted and you want to be really present in a meeting. The reason that we're not present is because our brains have gone elsewhere. You can't focus conscious attention on more than one thing at a time. So if you have the majority of your conscious attention on the conversation, what's being said, and one of the things that we tend to do is think, okay, what am I going to say next? Or, what's going to happen next? How do I control the future? If instead you listen to what somebody is saying, so listen to me, and then have a little bit of attention on your physical experience, like your calves or your fingertips, that can actually help ensure that you stay really, really present. And it's a great mindfulness exercise as well. So this is feeling. And again, feelings and feeling, very related, not the same thing though. The next is to prioritize self-care. This has come up, I think, in both of our other workshops as well. I really cannot stress the importance of this enough. Many of us think that self-care is an indulgence, especially the ladies. I assume men do this as well, but I certainly know that every woman I talk to talks about how much we need to be able to prioritize self-care more, and we're not. Many of us think of it as an indulgence. We think of it, for women at least, as day spas and sheet masks and whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. This is an essential caring of oneself, caring of your physical experience and your health. They are critical to making lasting changes. I think I mentioned this before, but if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you pay attention to the hierarchy, I don't have a slide here for this, but at the top of the hierarchy is self-actualization. So that's like, in the hierarchy, you have to have addressed and have fulfilled the lower level needs before you can ever move up to the higher level needs. So if self-actualization or these changes that we want to make in our lives are at the top of the pyramid, if we're not doing the basic things like taking care of our physical health and safety, there is no way for us to ever actually be able to maintain stuff at the top of the hierarchy. Does that make sense? Our body is always going to go back to prioritizing the lower level needs first. So if your body is in a place of survival as opposed to thriving, then you won't be able to maintain the changes, because your body is going to be prioritizing coming out of survival before it does actually making significant changes. So this is really, really important. Like, we think of self-care as just this thing that like, oh, that's a nice to have. It's a need to have. We can practice small amounts of self-care in order to thrive, or we get taken out for a long time because we're so burned out and overwhelmed that we have to spend an excessive amount of time recovering. And that's the whole survival piece. So this is burnout, for instance. And when I say self-care, the things in like the hierarchy of needs include, of course, ensuring that you feel physically and emotionally and psychologically safe, but also getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating healthy foods. Your emotional state is directly linked to your gut. It's our second brain. There's actually more, the same brain cells that are in your brain are in your gut. So if you're not eating healthful foods and if you're not taking care of your body, it can have a direct link to your emotional state and inhibit your ability to regulate and recover. I know I'm like spewing a lot of stuff. Any thoughts, questions on this one? Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay. So the next one is values. And I think you all did values recently, or did some values work, or maybe do values work quite a bit. Does anybody, do most of you know your core values, your personal core values? Yeah, good. Oh my gosh, this is the first group I've ever had say yes to that question. Most people are like, I don't know. I know what I like, kind of, I know what I like. So our values, of course, are very, very important. It sounds like I'm preaching to the choir on this one. But the thing is values, some people say, well, how do I choose my values? We don't choose our values. We uncover them. We mine for them based on the preferences, the ways that we are already making decisions. And the reason this is so important is because when we are not making decisions that are aligned with our values, life will feel off. And we often don't know why. It's sort of like if it feels like there's no grease on the wheels or something like that, or you're swimming upstream, but you can't quite put your finger on what it is that's going on. It's often because there's some sort of a misalignment or not honoring of values. If you don't know your values, there's a great free personal assessment at valuecentered.com. It's an easy way to at least get started. It's not the most robust, but it's a great starting point if you haven't done this work before. And this is really important because going back to like, why do I want to make changes? Why do I want to go through the discomfort of allowing myself to feel my feelings and know what I'm feeling and all of that kind of stuff? When we can realign to a value, that makes it easier for us to continue to prioritize this work of authenticity, this practice of authenticity. Because otherwise it's kind of like, it's just too hard. I'm not going to do it. But when we align it to a value, a top value of ours, like for instance, one of my top values is growth and progress. And so it's very easy for me to say, okay, am I continuing to grow? Am I continuing to progress in this? Because that is a really, really important value. And then finally, and this is the part that goes back to the zone of genius, is embracing your gifts. So I work with a ton of high achievers just like you, and many of us, and hopefully you're further along than I was for the majority of my life. Many of us are very, very good at rattling off our weaknesses, saying exactly what we're bad at. It's a lot harder for many of us to actually own our gifts. So what's so important here is that everybody has weaknesses. Everybody has things they're not good at. Nobody else has your gifts in exactly the way you have them. There has never been another person in the history of humanity that is exactly like you, with your perspectives, your gifts, your opinions, your talents, your skills, your values. So the more that you own all of who you truly are, the easier it is for us to decide it's worth it to go through the discomfort and the fear of learning how to really express it. So when it comes to discovering our gifts, there are a couple of things that I think are really helpful. Because again, I do this work with a lot of people. And many of us go, well, I don't like, what's the difference between gifts versus talents or skills? I think of talents and skills in particular as, anybody could probably go learn, like you could take a lot of classes and get really good at certain things. Those are skills often. Gifts are things that you're naturally and innately good at. The thing is that what happens for many of us is we actually see our gifts in many cases as our liabilities. Because they're so natural, because they're so innate, they come to the forefront so often that we feel like they're getting in the way a lot of the time. So what I actually find is really helpful is for us to actually look at what are those things that you consider to be your greatest liabilities. So just to give you a quick example, I believed for a very long time that you could be a professional or you could be emotional, but you could never be both. And so I worked very hard. It was a liability of mine that I had a lot of emotion. I was a very emotional person and could feel it and all the other things. And so I worked very hard to, cut that part out and try to hide that part of that weakness. When I finally actually recognized that it's actually one of my greatest gifts, it enabled me to open up to deepen relationships in ways that I'd never been able to. And this was at Google. This wasn't even, the work I do now. And to help people feel much more comfortable with me and to create connections that were human to human versus like shield to shield or robot to robot. It gave people permission to also be more of themselves. And of course, it's, certainly one of the greatest gifts in the work that I do now. But so anyway, what we're going to do now is actually spend a couple of minutes looking at how this is showing up in your life. So the first, actually, I'll pause. Are any thoughts or questions before we jump into the activity? Okay. So if you were to imagine yourself being audaciously authentic, full range, full expression, you have full permission to be yourself fully. Who are you? Write down just what comes up. Don't edit yourself. Who are you being when you give yourself full permission? I'll give you about 30 seconds. Just write down whatever comes up. I'll give you a hint. If you're worried about what everybody else thinks, that's already you not giving yourself full permission. So that's a place where you're holding yourself back. So if you were not worried about what anybody else thought, if it didn't matter what anybody else was doing, who would you be?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, this is why authenticity is so difficult, because we go, I don't know. Okay, so we'll go into the second question and then we'll do a quick breakout so that you all can discuss the difficulty of the question or what came up to hopefully spur some new ideas for you. So then finally, the other question is, what are your gifts? So spend a few seconds going back again. What comes naturally to you? If you just think about the things that come naturally to you, that you may call talents or skills, but hopefully gifts, or again, those liabilities. What are the things that are always getting in the way that if you were to look at it from a different lens are probably your gifts? So Jake, I'm thinking we can do breakouts for like 6 or 7 minutes. That works for everybody. So what we'll do is we'll go into breakouts to just discuss this. What came up? If you feel so inclined, share. Who are you being when you're giving yourself full permission? What are your gifts? One of the hard things is we feel very uncomfortable sharing what our gifts are, talking about them. Again, it's very easy for us to talk about our weaknesses or who we're not, but it's much more difficult for us to say, here is who I am in my fullest expression. Here are my gifts. It doesn't matter what you think. So if you want to use this as an opportunity to practice vulnerability and authenticity, that's great. Otherwise, just discuss.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and open those up.
Great.
Perfecto.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Excellent, thank you.
It's good timing, because I'll make sure in under 6 minutes, I'll have to break out so I won't interrupt anybody.
That's perfect.
One of the little tips I got when it came to really thinking about your core values, on top of what you said of what's truly important, it has to be true to you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about what is really true to me, I then think about what the complete opposite is to help validate the truth of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's often, you're absolutely right. It's like, what can we not be with? Or like, what is it that feels like absolutely terrible to us? And it's often sort of the opposite of that is the value that we have.
And
Or-
it's funny when I can get a little of your time when we slow down to do a little brainstorming. It's funny. I've written for many, many years and just have stacks and stacks and stacks of stuff that have to get all put together. But believe it or not, the title of the book I want to eventually create is called The Gift.
Ah, that's
Nice.
that's wonderful.
Nice.
That's so good.
So a lot of that backs into, that people read it. And, what do people say? When people think of a gift, what do they think? Oh, it's this nice box with a nice bow and ribbon around it. The gift is inside that,
Mhm.
So when that
Yeah.
top opens, what is actually in there?
What I think is so cool about what you just said. So as I was going through my coaching journey, I remember doing this. I was in one of the classes and we did an activity, and like my higher self gave me a gift, and I couldn't understand because there was nothing inside of it. And what I then later realized is everything is in the present. So it's this idea. It's not just like what is inside is the gift. It's also another word for the gift is the present. And so the only place where our lives exist, the only place where we can fully live is in the present. And so I think that's cool that it's even another play on your title.
Cool. Have you, I think it had to be 6 months or even a year ago. Did you ever connect with Katrina Murphy? She's been on each of these
She's been
workshops.
on. I don't believe we ever actually did. I'm trying to remember.
I think I did an intro a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because Katrina works with mostly women. Helping them get
we
through,
did. Yes, we
get
did
through
talk.
anxiety
Yes.
and okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the reminder. Yes, I had forgotten. And then as I was seeing her, I was like, you look so familiar. Yes, now that you've said that. Yes, we did. We talked.
It's one thing you said
Thank
about the present. She's not a therapist. She's not a psychiatrist, and she doesn't take people back. There's people that do that for you that you pay handsomely for. She's always about the present and looking towards the future.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because same. I mean, like I don't do regressions or any of that kind of stuff, but we are often looking back at childhood, just like we did in the workshop, because again, we're carrying it in the present. And it's the baggage is still there, right there with us in the present moment. And it's going to keep us from being able to live a better future because we just keep repeating past patterns without realizing it. So yes, I had forgotten that we had met. Thank you for the reminder of that.
You got it. How much time is left in the breakout, Jake?
Just under 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'll hang out for another minute or two.
So I just started reading Gary's new book, 12 and a half, which is all about like emotional intelligence and the 12 points that he has. He talks about like commitment, authenticity, being accountable, things like that. But the one I thought was interesting is his half is kind candor. And the fact that he has struggled with that, which seems absolutely ridiculous for somebody in his role would have trouble with that, but he does not like confrontation. And he talks about the fact that has caused him issues with employees that have either left because they didn't get the feedback that they needed to be better at their jobs, or they left not knowing why they got fired or not knowing the true reason. So I just thought it was interesting how that relates to knowing what your gift is, but also knowing what you need to work on that could make you a better person and he talks about tapping into the gifts that you do have so that those halves, because he says that everybody has one or two or three of these things that we have a half in and not a full unit in. So take the ones you do have a full unit in and lean on those to make the halves a little bit easier to deal with. So it's I will be honest, not one of his best books, but I think it's just because it's so much more practical than his storytelling tends to be. So maybe later in the book, it'll be like that. He said he goes in, I haven't finished it, but he said he goes into like how he applies all of it. Right now, I'm just going through each of the 12, so it's kind of dry.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, like what he talks about with the kind candor and how he had trouble with that.
It's interesting because and I don't know, maybe he talks about this, but like what usually keeps us from being direct, kind candor, is we're afraid of what somebody else will think or it's about the other person. So we put the lens on how am I being perceived. And so I love the way Brene Brown talks about it, which is clear is kind, unclear is unkind. That's one of my favorite ways of thinking about it.
Cool.
Because we get so vague because we want to be nice and we want to be kind. And I'm in the process of reading Not Nice right now, which is a fabulous book. Because the thing is, like, when we try to be nice, we end up being very unkind because we're not giving people the information that they truly need.
Very cool. I just wrote that down. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a great book.
There's 20 seconds left. Erica,
Yep.
love you tons. Thank you so much.
It was so good to see you.
Follow up. Thank you, Jake. Send everybody my regards. Let them know I had to jet to a meeting, and I will follow up with both of you.
We'll tell them you hated this so much that you were just like, peace out.
Love it. Take care.
Bye.
See you later. All right, they'll be back in 15, 10.
Okay, I don't need to do anything with this box that's in front of me, right? I can just close it. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
All right, let's go. One more.
All right.
Yep. Everybody's back.
Okay, so how was that? What came up in your discussions?
I feel like my group got an education from one individual, and I think everybody can already guess who it was, but I learned something within this, and then learned something again. So Amir, we all love listening to Amir. Let me just be honest.
Amir, can you share with the rest of us what did you teach?
I did not teach. I
Okay,
shared.
what did you share?
I shared. I said, we are being recorded, so I'm not going to use that word. I know who I am not, and that helps me a lot. And that also helps me observe the other ones, but I still don't hold them, responsible, accountable. So these are the 5 things that anytime you ask me, I say, I am a philanthropic enabler from my heart. And I'm a point of inspiration because I like to be, I love to be. And I'm kind. I don't have a mean bone in my body. And you can be, unkind to me and I still continue to be kind. And I'm a learner and a doer because I feel that education for the sake of education becomes entertainment with catastrophic results because you keep faulting yourself that you can't do it. You got to put what you've learned into action. So, you develop experience, and over time, experience becomes wisdom. And I call myself as a result of this, and I have been autodidact after I got my, graduate degree and all that, but I'm an accidental intellectual.
And what does it mean for you to be an accidental intellectual? What is an intellectual for you that's important?
You get a sense of perception of getting things at the conceptual root level, and then all of a sudden, experts that are getting paid or they're pundits, they're saying the same thing. And let's say, I'm sorry, this is 2 years ago, I had written like an article about that. Hey. Now my wife knows, I said, oh, did you remember? I can't believe that. And so I never thought of myself as an intellectual, but over time I said, well, I like poetry, I like prose, I like literature, I like art, I like this, that. Well, I'm just an accidental intellectual.
Well, it sounds to me like you're naturally curious.
Yes.
And I would bet that's one of your either greatest gifts or values, potentially. It sounds like you're very curious about the world and want to understand it from a place of openness and curiosity from what you're saying. And that gives you an ability to create meaning in new ways that become sort of thought leadership as well, from what you're saying. It sounds, that's very cool.
I accept. Remember Curious George? Now think of Curious Amir.
That's wonderful. How is it for the rest of you? Did anybody? Yeah, yes.
Me, Ahmad.
Yes, Ahmad.
So, very, very interesting. And I want to share, when Amir was talking about accident intellectual, I want to share something that happened to me that made me an accident intellectual myself, although I don't think of myself like that. Like almost a decade ago, I was in the East Village of Manhattan, and I was working in one of those coffee shops. And an old man walked in, distraught and confused, and tried to help him. Someone stole his iPhone, basically. He was in New York City. And I helped him set up cancer. The guy was a professor of breathing.
Hey, Ahmad, I don't know if you can hear us, but we're having the connection is not great.
Oh,
Yeah, you're cutting in and out. Ahmad, if you want to turn off your video, then maybe see if your audio fixes itself. Okay, now he's completely frozen.
Okay, well, we'll let him try to come back online. Does anybody else want to share? Oh, I think Lisa's trying to talk, but she's muted. Oh, you're not? Okay.
I just was reading his message go to someone else.
Yes, perfect. How do you feel about it being you, that someone else being you? What was the experience like for you?
Are you talking to me?
I am.
So I signed onto the webinar late. I am lost for the moment. I'm sorry.
Perfect.
I'm sorry.
No worries. That's okay.
I have to just
Thank
be
you for
very
being
honest.
No, I love it. That's great. What about anybody else want to share the experience? Your experience? Did anybody feel comfortable sharing some of your gifts or what came up as you did?
Yes. Manny here. This was you're doing an amazing work, by the way. I just want to say that you're doing an amazing work. And
Thank you.
Somebody mentioned something after I said what I said, and I was like, okay, that trumps everything. It's gratitude. But the one thing that I was speaking about is, and try not to live too much in the past. But at a certain point in another life, I was a bit of a minister and a bit of a minstrel. So I used to actually play in various churches, and I played the saxophone. I was a singer, a writer, and I used to create a lot. And I don't know, something happened. I guess it was some emotional trauma or something that came up, and I've dealt with. I'm working on it. And something happens where I stopped playing music. I stopped liking music. But when I am my authentic self, which was so hard to drudge up sometimes because there's so much behind it. When I write something, I used to write a lot of prose. When I used to write, or if I do something creative, I'm very much a creative person. So I put that on the tapestry of the human body, and I put my everything into a person in terms of, and it's digging deep into also their pain, what they're dealing with. So I find myself a bit of a healer, and I am becoming again a lover of souls, and that's why this has become so instrumental in bringing it out. So I am a lover of souls. I've found myself to be a listener more. I'm using much more of the adage of you got two eyes, and I'm sorry, two ears and one mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk.
I can feel that you have a very, very old soul and deep heart. And it makes sense to me that you would be a healer and would experience trauma that would hurt extra, potentially.
Oh, yeah.
That you're a deep feeler.
Oh yeah.
I mean, trauma hurts for all of us, but I can feel your energy. It's beautiful. Not the trauma, but your energy, your spirit is beautiful. Thank you for sharing. That's incredibly powerful. Anybody else want to share? I'll be honest. Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
So I was the other person who talked about gratefulness, and it's hard for me when I talk about the defense and letting down the guard and letting down the weapons. It's just accepting what you should be grateful for, and I'm a very critical on myself and a perfectionist, and as I've gotten older, gray hair didn't come out of a bottle. As I've gotten older and reflecting and taking time to sit back and just say, I've accomplished this, or I should be grateful for this. And more so, I'm seeing it through my children, you know, and being proud of them and their accomplishments. And I take some credit for that. You know, so for me in business, you know, I've had some accomplishments and I've had some, you know, not so great days, and just sitting back and accepting the goodness and just, you know, I'll mention her because she gave me great ideas to think about this. Katrina, you know, we had a nice chat once and, you know, talked about just being the best that you can be and, you know, accepting that for who you are. And so some of that authenticity is, this is me, this is who I am. The things that I need to work on, I'll work on, but my good qualities and, you know, my assets are, you know, caring and giving and being thoughtful. But, you know, I don't want to blame it on New York, but we're like so hardened sometimes we don't let people in, and we go through our battle of rush, do better, do more, do this, and just to sit back and, you know, reflect. And, you know, you talked about those words, you know, accept, reflect, and redirect. So it's an ongoing battle for me, and I think a lot of New Yorkers or people in the Northeast. So
I hope that it can reframe from battle to practice, because that's really all it is.
True,
and
true. I said I would let down the weapons in the guard. So
that's
it shouldn't be a battle anymore.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And you know, I think it's, again, I think what you said is so beautiful. And so I will I'm going to reiterate the thing that I said at the end of the last conversation, because I think it's really important here and speaks to a lot of what everybody is saying, is about really practicing grace with yourself. And, you know, if you were to imagine you were in a dark room, let's say, for instance, you're in a hallway, and the only way to get through the hallway is to go through a dark room. There's no lights, you have no flashlight, there's nothing. How would you do it if you knew you had to get through the room? Would you do it like brazenly with leaps and bounds? Slowly, yeah, carefully, right? Like, at least for me, I'm always afraid I'm going to step on a toy or a dog bone or something like that, right? Like you take very small baby steps, and it's very gentle. And if you bump into something, because you're going slowly, because you're going gently and gracefully, it doesn't hurt so much if you hit into something. If you're going super hard, super fast, it hurts a lot. And if that were to happen, if you were to step on something, if you hit something, you would likely go right back into the hallway and say, never mind, I'm fine. This is fine, right? Because it hurts. It's too dangerous to go through that dark room the way you were doing it. So think of it that way. If you allow yourself to take baby steps, this is practice. You're just going slowly. You're just going carefully, gracefully. It makes it so much easier to pivot as needed and move and be flexible with yourself and with your surroundings as you practice this authenticity. And the more you do that, the faster and more confident you become, because now you start to reorient yourself to the dark room. And then before you know it, you're on the other side. So we often try to go really big and try to put ourselves, Robert, like I imagine that you're thinking about some like hard situations where you would practice this stuff. That's kind of the equivalent of trying to go through with leaps and bounds through a dark room. Start small, start with these micro steps, because it can make it such a huge difference. And those build your confidence to help you it becomes easier then to take on those bigger challenges that may feel a little like battles right now, but at some point we'll stop feeling that way and we'll just feel like another challenge. So
there's an old Chinese proverb, every journey begins with a single step.
Lao Tzu is what whatever. He is my favorite. Yes, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Yeah, and that's what I've always said to my kids when they were growing up, and when they were faced with a task, I said, you can't finish the task until you take the first step.
Absolutely.
And taking that first step sometimes is the hardest step to take.
And this is very tangentially related, but it feels important to mention. I love what you just said. And the way that I often think about it, because many, many people come to me and they feel stuck. They feel like they don't know what to do. They want to make big changes in their lives, but they don't know what it is, or they feel too terrified to go make them. And what we're doing in those cases is we're putting so much importance on that step that we don't take any. So what I would encourage is for you to always think any step is a step forward. Doesn't even matter if it's a step to the side. But if you don't take any steps, that's all you're doing is going in a circle. So the more that you allow yourself to take any step and take the pressure off of that step, you'll get there eventually. You'll keep learning and growing and make it to the other side of the room. Thank you all so much. It was such a delight to speak with you. Please feel free, if you'd like to chat more, schedule some time on the calendar link that you'll be getting in your email. Would love to connect with you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. You all are fabulous, and I would love to support any of you that in any way I can.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so
Lane,
much.
Lane wanted to
Thank
say
you.
thank you to everybody. He had to step away for a meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Erica. We really appreciate what you did.
Amazing,
This is great.
everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You are
Thank you.
special.
Great
Thank you,
job.
Erica.
Yeah,
Take
feel
care.
good,
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Bye-bye.